Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine enters its third year and the world reels from the death of Putin critic Alexei Navalny in a Russian prison, the US, EU and UK have issued a record number of Russian sanctions on entities and individuals. As part of this sweeping campaign, they have also targeted an unprecedented number of Chinese companies, marking the first direct apportioning of blame toward Beijing since the start of the war. China has promised to retaliate to the sanctions. So will this send both US-China and China-EU relations spiralling? With me to discuss this are Chien-Huei, Academia Sinica Institute of European and American Studies Research Fellow, and Chen Ming-chi, Institute for National Defense and Security Research CEO. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today. 2 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Germany's Handelsblatt has reported that China has stepped in to fill the gap left by Western sanctions against Russia, leading to a surge in trade between China and Russia. By 2023, the trade volume between the two nations reached $240 billion, placing China as a major beneficiary of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Professor Chen, could you explain to us these most recent sanctions in the context of what has come before?
Important message is that finally EU was on board this time. The US started to sanction a Chinese company since 2022, 6 months into the war in Ukraine. And finally, the EU now, this time, willing to cooperate with United States to sanction the Chinese company as well as many other countries.
What's brought the change on?
I think Europe hesitated, like it always been. I mean, first of all, EU is a collection of nations, so it takes a while for them to achieve a certain conclusion. And secondly, given the fact that the EU has a very deep economic relationship with China, so they hesitate to sanction any Chinese company, even though that is hurting European security. So they adopt a very conservative and gradual steps.
Okay. Professor Wu, so very interesting that during a recent trip to the Munich Security Conference, Wang Yi, the foreign minister, actually met with Ukraine's foreign minister and promised that China would not send lethal weapons to Russia. However, these sanctions are targeted at companies that the US, these Western countries, believe have stepped over a line. How should we interpret these comments?
The divergence between European position, US position, and Chinese claim. So that's why they diverge from the very beginning whether there should be a sanction against Chinese companies. European countries and the US, they claim there's a surge of export from China to Russia. That's evidence that China is indeed providing weapons and other fighting materials for Russia. This is, I think, the basic divergence here is whether and how the European countries and US provide more substantive evidence to substantiate its claim that China is indeed providing weapons.
Professor Chen, you would agree with that?
I think this time the Europe is willing to cooperate because probably the US can provide substantial evidence, as Professor Wu just mentioned. I think they are going ahead with that, although those what are those companies on the list haven't been declared yet, but they remain to be seen.
Okay, so let's take a look at China's response to the sanctions. Russian news agency TASS reports Liu Pengyu, the spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in the United States, having stated the US imposed more unilateral sanctions on Chinese companies, citing their relations with the Russian side. This is a typical move of economic coercion, unilateralism and bullying. Furthermore, the spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in the UK remarked, "We firmly oppose the UK's sanctions on relevant businesses, which are unilateral actions that have no basis in international law. The UK side must know that any action that harms China's interests will be met with our firm response." Professor Wu, so what does this mean when China says that these sanctions are lacking in international law?
Okay, That's a very interesting point because when we talk about economic coercion, it's mainly we think about China is in fact imposing or exercising economic coercion to other countries, especially democratic countries and include Taiwan. And this is ironic because China is using the tactic they are frequent using to accuse the behavior of European and American and United States. And I think there's a difference between economic coercion and sanction. Economic coercion is mainly used by for diplomatic reasons and for something like inviting Dalai Lama to Mongolia or Australia or Meng Wanzhou in Canada. This is typically the reason for China to use economic coercion. But sanction is different, especially when it comes from sanction based on international law or sanction against countries committing international crimes, and war is one of the most important one. So the European countries and the US, they impose sanctions against Russia. It's mainly because the Russian invasion into Ukraine.
So what is their argument when they say this is against international law?
Basically, their argument is if a sanction is legal, then it has to be authorized by UNSC. So if there's no authorization from United Nations Security Council, then it cannot be legal. But as I mentioned, UNSC can authorize a sanction, but sanction is not necessarily legal only with the authorization. Under international law, there's a rule which called countermeasure, which is a basic norms of international law. And when countries break the security and peace of international community, which entails other countries, they are in a position to retaliate. This is normally we call the state responsibility of international law. So based on this, third countries, including European Union and US, they are in a position have a right to retaliate.
Okay, so you believe that they do have that legal right to issue the sanctions on China. Professor Chen, China, as we heard there, is not happy. They said that they will retaliate. What sort of sanctions or what sort of retaliation do you think that they could bring forward?
I think they will be highly targeted, and I think have to be precise, because given the China's economic situation, they don't want to broaden the target and backfire and impact on its own economy. So probably they will target certain companies, individuals, and try to send a message. But that is nothing beyond sending a message.
But how would they define the companies?
Probably some company, they are providing, they blacklist already some defense contractor in the United States, Lockheed Martin, such as this. So they will sort of reciprocate by doing this and target certain individuals in EU, and so as to air their frustration and express their displeasure of these measures.
Yeah, and you mentioned, of course, China's own economic situation is pretty dire at the moment. Yes. So what we know that basically the companies that have been sanctioned, some of them are state-owned companies. What sort of damage do you think this could do to China, and the intent of the damage?
I think again, it's very targeted. A certain amount of company, not that many, and I don't think they will bring a big impact on Chinese economy. However, China's economy is not doing well. It needs a lot of foreign investment. So he tried not to destroy the whole environment, but have to send a message internationally, but also serve the domestic purpose.
Absolutely. Professor Wu, so Voice of America has actually reported that 3 out of China's 4 major state-owned banks, that's Industrial and Commercial Bank, China Construction Bank, Bank of China, have actually halted transactions with Russian financial institutions since January this year because of their fear of those sanctions. So what do you make of this sort of dual process, dual approach where internally they have stopped the transactions, but externally they would say, oh, these sorts of sanctions are illegal.
Further sanction would impact on the health of Chinese economy and the health of these state-owned banks and enterprise. Imagine if U.S. impose sanction measures against these three banks by delisting them from SWIFT. That would bring about a huge damage to Chinese bank. I don't think China would take the risk, venture into this. This is why I think Chinese banks are taking very cautious approach.
How do you think this whole thing will play out in terms of impacting China-US relations?
Well, both sides, the U.S. and China, is intend to sort of warm up their bilateral relationship a little bit since the San Francisco meeting on the side of APEC last year. I think they want to keep the momentum. That's very important to China, and also before the U.S. Big presidential election, that's also important to the U.S. So both sides have the incentive not to destroy, not to deteriorate But however, on this issue, on this USC as a very important issue, they still have to express their displeasure. So I think targeting, the U.S. measures, sanction is not new. First of all, secondly, is target only certain amount of companies and the individuals. It's not broad-based, tax, tariff kind of retaliation. So I think both sides have. But however, this will sort of affect the bilateral relationship, no matter it's about the Sino-U.S. relationship or Sino-Europe relationship. I think they will be affected by this, but I think they will manage not to spill over to other domains.
Okay, and Professor Wu, would you say that what is the message that the U.S. is trying to send China? Let me read to you what Gerald Connolly, has a lawmaker in the U.S. has said. China has to understand that the same kinds of sanctions which are beginning to really take hold in Russia can also be applied to China. And frankly, China has a lot more to lose than Russia. What message do you think China is getting from these?
Okay, of course, China is more integrated into a global economy than Russia does. So if sanction really comes from the U.S., Chinese economy would definitely suffer much more than Russian, because Chinese economic rely more on international commerce than Russian one. So if U.S. is sending the right message, and China get it right, then China would have to rethink its policy, whether it would continue to supply military materials or lethal weapons to Russia. Then if China is willing to either narrow down its size or to be more restrict in doing so, then it would probably weaken the military power of Russia. Then I think this is what U.S. is trying to do to prevent China from supplying Russia.
Okay, and quickly, how do you think this will impact China-EU relations?
Well, I think there must be a transatlantic coordination between the U.S. and EU on this issue, because they have some working group on China issue. I think they discussed it before so let's more or less EU, U.S., UK, they do it simultaneously. And in the past few years, I think under Biden administration, U.S., EU, and UK relation is much better than the Trump one. So the coordination against China is much more coherent than a previous administration. And if EU and US and UK, they can make a coherent effort to convince China or to make a credible threat to China, they would suffer or they would be faced with retaliation. Then in this way, I think China may, to some degree, willing to concede a bit.
Okay, so it's not that they could retaliate, show their displeasure by retaliating, by reducing trade with the EU, because that would hurt. But presumably that would hurt China itself at a time when they are particularly vulnerable.
I don't see China has so many policy tools in its hand to retaliate. Okay, I think China EU it has come to a very difficult situation, especially after EU sanctions against Chinese because of Xinjiang issues, and China retaliate by sanctioning European Parliament parliamentary members, and there comes the suspension of EU-China comprehensive agreement on investment. So EU-China relation has already been in a very difficult situation, and in the past few months, Chinese invest into Chinese has run away from China. So I don't see China has so many cards to play in terms of retaliation against European majors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Chen, now from Western sanctions on China to China's sanctions on Taiwan, starting this year, China will effectively remove the 12 of the tariff concessions that had existed under the Cross-Strait Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, or ECFA. The products affected are 12 petrochemical raw materials, and then in the next wave there are reports that the CCP is considering targeting another 34 Taiwan-made agricultural and fishery products by cancelling their tariff concessions. So firstly, why is China targeting these products?
Well, first of all, I mean, no matter it's a petrochemical or the agriculture, aquaculture products, I think China can easily find a substitute domestically. First, they build their own manufacturing capacity already. Okay. So it is replaceable. So that really was during the signing up of the ECFA in 2010. There was a concession, and with the use the economic tool to achieve its political goal, which is bring Taiwan closer to China and to reward the administration. They are willing to become very friendly to China. I think that is the main purpose. And since the 2016, ever since President Tsai Ing-wen took office, I think that goal has lost its cause. And they gradually use this selective economic sanction, economic coercion to show their displeasure, and it's sending a signal to Taiwan. And targeting the agriculture and the aquaculture products, including fishery products, is a way that, because although the trade volume is not very high, I think that that hurts certain farmers and fishermen. They are probably located in the stronghold of the ruling party. I think that is highly political.
Right. Professor Wu, targeting these people, will Beijing achieve its goal of turning them against the ruling Democratic Progressive Party? That's the intent. Will it achieve that goal?
Actually, I have an idea whether China has already been successful in the past few years, because agricultural products and agricultural products, China has used its sanction in the past few years, in the past 8 years, quite frequently. Okay, if we look at the domestic politics or constituencies, in the South, Pingdong is still governed by DPP. And another one is Yunnan County. I would say it's more about domestic politics instead of China-Taiwan relations. And in Tainan County, Tainan City is already been DPP for maybe 2 decades. So personally, I don't think China has been successful in using agriculture and agricultural products. But I think it introduced a sentiment because we tend to have a sympathy on farmers and fishermen because we think they are less prejudiced, and they are less in a social status in less how shall I say that, less protected by this economic system. So the society has a sympathy on this. It produces public opinion or public resentment against the government. I think this is more or less a success what China is trying to do. But in terms of domestic election results, I don't think China has succeeded in doing this.
Okay.
Especially in the past few years, the agriculture products has largely diversified its export destination.
Yeah, and the markets have diversified, isn't it? Professor Chen, finally then, if ECFA was to unravel completely and essentially all the concessions are cancelled, then China has no economic leverage in that area against Taiwan.
They want to use the economic coercion sparsely and more targeted and more precise. That is the dilemma they are facing. The more they use today, the less they have tomorrow. And the full-blown war is very difficult, but they still need some tool to send a message. I think this is a way for communication. However, I think, as we mentioned, that Taiwan, because of China's sanction and the coercion, we have successfully and finally determined to diversify our market. And for example, pineapples, castor apple, and wax apple, I call it the 3 apple problem. And now I think we export a lot to Japan and US. That requires some determination and investment in cold chain. And that was something that we hesitate to do because it takes a lot of investment. But finally, the government, facing this strong pressure from China, we make the investment and we successfully diversify our export market. So that's very important. So China is basically, the way they do it is they use a preferential treatment to create some dependency, and they exploit the dependency to their advantage, use it as a leverage for their political goal. I think now not only Taiwan, I think many countries in the world has be highly alert about this. So we want to de-risk. We want to diversification. I think that is still remain the basic and the solid foreign economic policies.
As very final, Professor, how much further do we need to go in order to de-risk, in order to protect ourselves?
So the question is how much is too much? How dependent is dependent?
Rather, how much more needs to be done to so that we aren't dependent?
Yeah. So in the past few years, okay, let's go back to 30 years ago when China get its economic growth. So that's when textiles and bicycles, they went to China. And that's also the time petrochemical, they want to go to China. And then in the new millennium is PC, they went to China. Then after that is semiconductor, they went to China. But because of U.S.-China trade war, a lot of economic sectors, they relocate to Southeast Asia. This is correspond to China Ing-wen's new southbound policies. So, in fact, I don't see there's a significant risk or how much we have to do, because I think the trend is already there, because the global supply chain has significantly relocated to Southeast Asia or moving out from China. And this is not a really danger, I think. We, of course, we cannot so too dependent on China, but so far I really don't see there's a significant risk already.
Great. Okay, so we're going to have to wrap it up there on a high note that Taiwan is not too dependent on China. Thank you so much, Chien-Huei and Chen Ming-chi, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.